Warning. Depiction of dead animals. Thank you to those who found and read my first post, and the few who expressed worry and hope for my son in the replies. I appreciate it. However, the situation isn't getting much better. This is going to be another long post. This all happened in one day, so bear with me here. Mere seconds after I wrote my first post, I got up, slid my sandals on, and practically sprinted out the door to go look for Ethan. I could hear police sirens in the distance. Since I was on the phone with them the entire time I wrote my last post, so it's no surprise they'd be here quick for a missing child's case. The street was quiet and it was freezing outside. Thus it didn't help that my pajama shirt was short-sleeved. I started walking around my house, calling out my son's name, hoping that he'd hear me and come back. No matter how loud I called his name, I saw no signs of him anywhere. Yes, I know it's inconsiderate of me to be yelling at the top of my lungs in the middle of the street when it's the middle of the night. But in the corner of my eye, in the dark forest right next to our house, I saw him. I just barely saw Ethan walking around, almost like a robot in the forest, struggling to get under branches and through bushes. Instinctively, I ran like I've never ran before as cop cars started to pull up to my house and a ton of cops got out of the cars. I slammed my body through branches, breaking them from the trees they were a part of, not caring that I was getting bruised. And I made it and swooped Ethan off his feet, hugging him tightly. I was so worried about him, and it's a miracle he wasn't able to get any farther. Minutes later, we were sitting at our dining room table as a detective was sitting across from us questioning Ethan. The detective was asking Ethan simple questions like, "How's your home life? Does your dad treat you good?" And Ethan answered all this, saying that his home life was great and how I always take care of him and treat him gently, which is all true. It all started to get unnerving when the detective asked Ethan another simple question. "Why did you run away?" This was the question that I was wanting to know. As a parent, it's the question you want to know the most. And what he said made my concern for his safety go from 100% to about 200%. Ethan answered this question. "A voice told me to," he said, and he said this in such a sweet, naive, and unworried manner. Ethan is only 8 years old, so he doesn't understand the true meaning and horror that sentence had to us. What voice was he talking about? I had to call and wake my ex-wife up after that, which I'm sure was fun for her, having her ex-husband calling her in the dark and early hours of the morning. She picked up, sounding groggy and annoyed, and I instantly regretted calling her to tell her about Ethan running away. But I just couldn't hang up now, so I told her. Her hatred for me was even higher now than before. She was irate. She was yelling at me through the phone so much that I thought she was going to destroy her vocal cords like an exploding building. She was degrading me heavily, calling me stuff like a terrible father, a son of a bitch, scum of the earth, worthless motherfucker, and all of that stuff was probably true, but I didn't tell her that it was getting to me. I'm a mentally strong person, but I'm quickly turning into a mentally weak person after the night before and what was happening then. It was still very early in the morning, so I put Ethan back to bed before he had to go see his mother for the day. Many of our neighbors were coming over to see what was going on, concerned about the whole situation, but the police told them to stay away until they get everything figured out. I looked outside to look at one of my neighbors, Mrs. Johnson. The entire neighborhood was being lit up by red and blue lights. After I called my ex-wife and put my son to bed, I walked up to the detective who was in the kitchen writing on a piece of paper. I told him I wanted to speak to him about something, and he reluctantly agreed and put his paper and pen down on the counter. I was contemplating if I should mention the whole window thing going on with Ethan, but I figured that it was best to, so I told him everything. How the other 3 nights before, Ethan had been getting up from bed in the middle of the night to stare out his bedroom window. I even ran towards my room and retrieved the cryptic drawing that Ethan had drawn the other night and showed it to the detective. He took a good look at it and was equally disturbed. He took what I was saying seriously, luckily. The detective cleared his throat and looked at me, almost hesitatingly. Listen, there's something I need to tell you. The detective started to tell me. I looked at him. What is it? I replied to him. The detective started nervously tapping on the kitchen counter and looking at his black boots. The detective started nervously tapping on the kitchen counter and looking down at his black boots, but he didn't continue what he was saying. You know what? Never mind. You have a good night and keep your son safe, the detective said while patting my shoulder. He started to walk out of the house, telling the rest of the police in my house that the search was over and that they could close the case. I waved to the detective, but a part of me was desperate to find out what the detective... I waved to the detective, but a part of me was desperate to find out what the detective was going to tell me before he changed his mind. I didn't sleep for the rest of that night. I just stayed up in the living room with the TV on, though I wasn't paying attention to the TV. I had my head in my hands, just thinking about what I've been going through every single night. What was happening to my boy? I started worrying that something was going on with him mentally, and that almost made me cry. I wanted to make sure Ethan was really okay. Figure out why he's always staring out his window, and what voice told him to run away. Ziggy was there to comfort me, as she jumped onto the couch with me and meowed in my face. She may be just a cat, but she could always tell when I was going through something. 8 a.m. rolled around soon enough, and it was about the time Ethan was waking up. I walked to his room and told him good morning, as he smiled and said good morning back. He was acting as if nothing happened just hours earlier. Shortly after, He showered and brushed his teeth as I got his clothes for the day out and I fed the cat. When Ethan was out of the shower and dressed, I helped him comb his hair in a new style he wanted. Man, I think I did it. I helped him comb his hair in a new style he wanted. And I think I did a great job. Ethan loved how he looked with it, and it made me happy to see that he was happy with something I did. His mother came to pick him up shortly after. We looked at each other but didn't exchange any words. I said bye to Ethan, and he told me that he wished that I could go with him and his mother. That made my smile fade, knowing that Ethan has witnessed a lot of my arguments I've had with my 2 ex-wives. I knew I should have done a better job trying to maintain my relationships so Ethan wouldn't go through the struggle of me divorcing someone. I watched them drive off, and after I saw the car drive up the long hill towards our house and turn out of sight, I suddenly felt overwhelmingly tired. I couldn't think of anything else to do except for going into my room and just sleep for a while. I needed something to do that would take my mind off of everything that has been happening. So I let myself drop onto my bed, and I fell asleep relatively quickly. I woke up about 5 hours later at 1 p.m. I yawned and was glad that I took a nap because I felt relaxed and, for the first time in 4 days, not worried. For a majority of the day, I watched a couple of shows, made myself something to eat since Ethan would be out for a long time, and went on a refreshing walk through the neighborhood. At around 7 p.m. after my walk, I decided to go into Ethan's room to see if I could find anything that could possibly answer my question on Ethan and his obsession with his window, and hopefully, the voice. I creeped into his room, and at first glance, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Nothing was really different. I looked at the window and shook my head. I went through his closet. Nothing but toys and books. I looked through his bed. Nothing. I looked through his desk. I found something. It was a big stack of papers, and I could tell that they were all drawings. They were definitely new ones, as I've never seen these drawings before. I hadn't seen Ethan draw anything for a while, unless he was drawing when he was supposed to be asleep last night. I was about to leave them alone when I remembered the drawing he made 2 nights ago. The drawing that showed him staring out his window. The words, "I see it." When I had that thought, I immediately snatched a batch of drawings and took them into my room to check them out, hoping that they would be something. Another side of me just hoped that they were simply regular drawings of superheroes, plants, and animals. They weren't. It was more cryptic drawings. I consider them even more cryptic than the last one. There had to be at least 6 drawings, so I'll try running through them all the best I remember. The first one was of a very tall figure, his head reaching the top of the page, and it was all black with a red outline and pale, white eyes. It was just a drawing, but I felt like the thing Ethan had drawn was staring directly at me. It looked like a literal demon. The second one is one that is going to stick with me for a long time. I'm not sure how I can even explain it. It was a drawing of Ethan on his bed, asleep, and he had drawn his room perfectly. It looked like an exact blueprint. I was blown away. Before I remembered what I was dealing with, then I saw that he had drawn his window in his room as well. And staring through his window from outside was just a dark face with red eyes staring in at him. And Ethan had put so much detail into those eyes that I could tell that whatever this was had violent intent. The third one was of me. It was a drawing of me on the floor, bleeding out. That's all the picture was. I don't know how I can explain how I was feeling. All I remember at that moment was that my heart literally stopped beating. It felt like time had stopped at that very second. I persisted and kept going through the drawings. The fourth one was of Ethan, walking through the same forest I saw him in last night. But at the end of the paper, I saw him drawing it. But at the end of the paper, I saw a drawing of the same creature that was on the first drawing, seemingly trying to lure Ethan towards him. The drawing of the forest looked almost identical to the actual one, so I was mind blown again. I kept going through the drawings. The fifth one was just a drawing of Ethan walking out a door. It looked unfinished, scribbled and rushed, as if you were rushing to get your homework done in class before it was due. But I'm sure it represented Ethan walking out of the house when he was running away. I'm not sure. The sixth one was of Ethan holding a large kitchen knife and walking into his room and sitting on his bed from the slight view we see of his room, since he had drawn his door being slightly open. All the drawings were beautiful pieces of art, but they all made me scared, nervous, worried, especially the sixth one. Why would he draw these? Ethan's actions as of late have been making me question my credentials as a father. Was I doing a good job of parenting my kid if he was drawing shit like this? I felt the sudden urge to drink. I left the papers on my bed, tiredly made my way to the kitchen and opened the liquor cabinet, and hopelessly took out a whiskey bottle and poured myself a glass. I chugged the whiskey down, swallowed it, and started shaking uncontrollably. I poured another glass of whiskey and chugged it down again. I was about to pour myself yet another glass before I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Ethan was home. I already felt like I was going to pass out, so I put the whiskey bottle back in the liquor cabinet and put my glass in the dishwasher and waited Ethan to show up to the front door so I could open it. I rested my head on the kitchen counter before he knocked on the door, feeling sick from the whiskey I had drunk so fast. I don't want to be drunk. Not now. I walked to the door and opened it, and Ethan walked in and hugged me. I hugged him back and looked at my ex-wife. I think she could tell I had just been drinking and gave me the face that signified that she unapproved. My feet hurt a lot, Ethan tells me. I chuckle. Why is that, buddy? I ask him, kneeling a bit. We did a lot of hiking today, and I got to see a lot of ducks in the river, he replies, making swimming hand movements. I could hear my ex-wife laughing. We sure did. I'll see you another time, alright? She says to him, avoiding my gaze. Ethan simply says, okay, and she leaves, walking down the porch towards her car. I closed the door since she didn't have the courtesy of doing that for us. I started walking him to his room since it was time for bed, and he could tell that something was up with me. I must have looked tired and pained. What's wrong? He says, looking up at me. I looked back at him and saw the sincerity on his face, the innocence. I brushed it off as just being tired and wanting to get to bed early tonight. He seemed to believe that. Ziggy ran into his room, since she likes to alternate between our rooms nearly every night, and Ethan seemed excited to finally sleep with Ziggy again. I had also noticed that she's been sleeping in my room a lot lately. Why hasn't Ziggy been sleeping in your room? I ask Ethan as he walks into his room. He turns back to me and looks at me and shrugs. I don't know. I think it was the first day of your break from work, he responds, not sounding entirely sure in his statement. I realized that on the first day of my break from work, that was when Ethan had started getting up every night to stare out of his window. I was hoping that it wouldn't happen again tonight. I didn't think too much about it though, and told Ethan to get a good sleep since he had my school in the morning. I didn't think too much about it though, and told Ethan to get a good sleep since he had school in the morning. And closed the door as he was getting under his covers with Ziggy. I got in my bed, turned the TV on as background noise, and went to sleep without a hitch. I woke up to what sounded like whimpers coming from Ethan's room. Not just any kind of whimpering, but it sounded like distressed whimpering that I could tell was getting lower every second. I turned my head to see the door to Ethan's room open. I automatically knew something had to have been wrong, because I distinctly remembered that I had closed this door before going into my room to sleep. So I got up to check it out. And the first step I made getting up from my bed made a loud creak in the floor. I winced at the sound. I made my way to his room and opened the door a little bit more so I could see the entirety of his room. It was something straight out of a horror movie. I saw my son holding a large kitchen knife, just standing still, breathing heavily. I noticed there was blood all over the knife and all over his shirt and face. And for a second, I seriously thought he stabbed himself or something. Before I looked down a little bit more. On the edge of Ethan's bed was Ziggy. Ziggy's entire body was cut all the way open like an unzipped jacket. And there was blood all over the edge of the bed, and blood was still dripping from her body. her fur turning to a crimson color. I realized shortly that was the source of the whimpering, and it was too late to save Ziggy. Ethan had killed her. I looked back up to face my son, terrified of the realization that hit me like a pile of bricks. He had absolutely no remorse on his face. That's when I looked into his eyes. Ethan's eyes? They weren't his eyes. Hey everybody, thank you for tuning in to another video. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you next time.